السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
My responsibility is only to introduce Brother Kareem Latif, who emcees this evening's program, one of our board members of the Nahii Masjid. Alhamdulillah.
Alright, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless this gathering. I'm very, very happy to see so many people come out on such a short notice. We all know what's going on in the world today, and we were all talking together in our Shura group chat. We thought that'd be very, very important to do a session with the community, right? There's sessions like this going on at different masajids all over this weekend, so we're very happy to be able to host one. We're very happy to have our beloved brother Baker and sister Aya coming from CAIR on such short notice, so thank you guys very much. Like I said, we all know the situation that's going on in the world today. What we wanted to do and why we wanted to host this program is we wanted to make sure that our community knows how to speak about this in a knowledgeable way. And then we also want to know, because there's a lot of thoughts out there on what can I say and what can't I say. It's a very sensitive topic, speaking about it at school and at work, and we see in the news a lot of people and the repercussions that are happening when they do speak out. So alhamdulillah, we're going to be able to talk to both of these. We're going to have a little bit of open Q&A, inshallah. And it's not just tonight. We hope that everyone that's here tonight can also make it at 4:45 on Sunday morning. We're going to have a tahajjud as well. So please come out for that as well. Invite all of your friends, all of your family. It would be very, very important. The brothers and sisters in Palestine need our dua. So please make every effort that you can. I know it's very early, but it will be worth it, inshallah. So without further ado, Brother Baker, I'd like to introduce you. He's no stranger to our community, so please give him your full attention. He's going to be giving us a little bit of background and perspective of the environment right now.
جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وآله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما علمتنا يا رب العالمين. Oh Allah, allow us knowledge that is beneficial and a beneficial way that we can act on it in a way that it is held on our good scales on the Day of Judgment and not held against us on the Day of Judgment. And ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He alleviates the suffering and the oppression that these Muslims in Palestine are facing and have been facing for the last almost 100 years or so. And I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He frees them from that oppression. And I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He allows us to be those people who are helping. Can you hear me now? All right. And that He allows us to be people who are helping this cause and alleviate the suffering anywhere around the world. So I figured the best way to tackle this subject is if we ask questions and we go along with them all throughout the course. And there are some popular questions that keep coming up online. And so we'll start with them. And then we'll see historically how the situation in Palestine has unfolded to the disaster that it is today, and other things that we could do here as Americans living in Jersey, what abilities we have and how we can make a change towards that issue. And then maybe what to try to figure out what the solution can be. Obviously, we're not going to be the ones figuring it out just here in this masjid, but at least we all have a goal that we do want some peace and prosperity in that area, bi'idhnillah. So the first thing that we will say is that what are the tenets, and we mentioned this in the khutbah just to summarize because some people weren't there, of a regime that are welcoming enough that allow other than their own constituents to thrive. And we mentioned them in the khutbah, right? The 5 basic areas that have to be allowed for all people within a region, within the world, to be treated as human beings in order for a governing body to be welcoming, right? And who remembers them? Who could tell me one of them? Go ahead. It's okay. Who knows one of them? Life. One of them. The protection of life. The protection of life. And then you know Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned that in the Quran as well, right? Because these are part of maqasid al-sharia, the basic tenets that Allah Azza wa Jal intends amongst all of the people. And He said in Surah Al-Ma'idah in verse 32 that He instructed and He wrote upon the children of Israel, the Muslims, even from all the way back at the time of Musa alayhi salam, Bani Israel, that whoever takes a life unless it's for a punishment or punishment of murder or mischief in the land. Meaning what? That Allah Azza wa Jal is saying that to take a life for a just cause, and he mentioned two here in this particular verse, which is that a person who murders someone, that their punishment is to be murdered. Al-qatil yuqtal. And also a person who causes terror in the land, irhab, also can face the punishment of the death penalty. And we're going to define these to see if and what's going on across the ocean over there in Palestine. It will be as if they killed all of humanity. So if you killed somebody without any innocent, and Allah didn't pertain this to a religion, if you killed any innocent human being, it's as if you killed all of humanity. And if whoever saves a life, it will be as if they saved all of humanity. Saved one innocent soul, it's as if you saved all of mankind. And so the first thing we have to ask ourselves, if we all want to treat each other as human beings, we value each other as all the children of Adam, then we need to have the protection of life. What's another one? Protection of what? Property. Protection of property, exactly. And everyone understands that here, right? Everyone understands that here. Even the most right-wing friends that you have, or the most leftist friends that you have, or the colleagues that are amongst you, everyone understands your right, your entitlement, your protection for what you own. Nobody could come up in your house and say, you know what, today it's mine. My great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather used to own this land, and it was taken from him. It's mine now. I'm huddling up in here. You're the rightful owner. You bought it. You worked hard for it. You're still probably paying for it. You're probably dying. Your kid's still paying for it at this point. But at least this is your property, right? It's your property in your name. And Allah Azza wa Jal taught us that this is one of the things that we protect so a society can thrive. And that's why things like usury, riba, is prohibited, because it exploits the people who need the money. It's an exploitation. It's making the poor poorer and the rich richer. And that's how we got to this 1%, just so you know. So you see, here's a very big picture. And the reason we have to cover these, and you're probably wondering what this has to do with Israel and Palestine, is that because we're talking about a regime who claims that they are the only democracy in the Middle East. They're talking about a governing body. So we have to start peeling away at this claim to see if it's baseless or they actually, in fact, have some sustenance to this claim. So the protection of property, and that's why usury is no good, and you're starting to see that's how the wealth is in the in 1% of the people here, the wealthiest people, and 99% of us are just scattering of whatever's left. That's why you see stealing is prohibited, inheritance is important. Another one, protection of what? So we said life, property, what else? Family, which comes into dignity and lineage, so your family. That's why adultery is not allowed, right? That's why things like prostitution and indecency is not allowed. And you see, and this is in a society, an open society, to protect the society from these things. Another one, there's two more, which is freedom of religion. Correct, that's the fourth one, the freedom of religion. And so they should allow those people who want to practice and believe in whatever they want to believe in, they should allow them to do that. And Islam says so. By the way, just so you're all aware, right? You remember Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, right? The second Khalifa in Islam. When the Christians said that we are not giving these keys except to this man, and they described Umar ibn al-Khattab, and when he came, they loved him so much, they said, please pray in the Holy Sepulchre Church. And he said, no. He said, if I pray here, the Muslims after me are going to take this as a masjid and they're going to take it from you. So he walked outside, he prayed his prayers outside, and then he walked away, went to another area. Today in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, in Bayt al-Maqdis, the Holy Sepulchre Church stands right next to Masjid Umar ibn al-Khattab. They made a masjid right where he prayed. So the preservation of religion is important. It's very, very important. Basic tenet, that you value people even if they disagree with you. Okay, and what's the last one? Protection of health. Protection of health. And that's why things like intoxicants and being openly, drinking and all of this stuff, and, that's why you have organizations now created like Mothers Against Drug Drivers and all this other stuff, because of us allowing this kind of stuff in our own society. So these are the basic tenets, the basic Maqasid, the pillars upon which a society needs to grow and thrive on. So based on that, when you hear a statement and you are asked, oh, Muslim, you see, most of us were in college, we're at a corporate world, and you know, for the ones who was born and raised here, you're the cool Muslim. You know why you're the cool Muslim? Because they got to know you. They got to know you, Muhammad. They got to know you, Khadija. They got to know you. Right? You know, you're not like the other Muslims, like those crazy people on TV. You're like the cool Muslim. Right? That's what it is. So you don't want to ruin that reputation. But then it comes down to issues like this. And Allah said, in the middle of a fitna, this is a fitna. This is a trial and tribulation for the world. That your true faith will come out. Your true faith will come out. So then they're going to ask you, they're going to put you in a corner. Does Israel have a right to defend themselves against what happened to them, the atrocities that happened on October 7th, as if this started on October 7th, as if there was nobody inhabiting that land, there was no conflict, there was no back and forth at all for the last 100 years. And they tell you, did Israel have the right to defend themselves from what happened on the atrocities of October 7th? You know what the problem is? Is the way the question is phrased in and of itself. The word defend, like we mentioned earlier, means that you are a victim. That's when you use the word defend. Because when somebody comes into your house and you went out guns blazing because they were trying to hurt your family or take what is not theirs from you, and you defended it, you defended yourself. You defended your wealth. You defended your family. And every courtroom in the book says good, 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 good. Checks all boxes. So you were the victim when you use the word defend. Let's find out how we got to this question to begin with. So if you could go to the map, we're going to skip a couple of these. Oh, you already went to it? Let me see. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Keep. All right, wait, slow down. Go back one. What's this? Okay, so let's go over this real quick. In the early 1900s, after the disasters that were happening to the Jewish people, okay, and it was a disaster, and Muslims are completely against the atrocities that happened during the Holocaust. We are completely against that. Like I mentioned, one of the tenets is preservation of life. It is a sad situation in what happened. But then some groups of intellectuals started planning. What do we do with these Jewish people? As bad as it was that they did to them, what happened to them, they still didn't want them in Europe. It's in their writings. So what did they write? Look at this guy, Ronald Storrs, the British Oriental Secretary in Cairo. He wrote on the 28th of December 1914, the inclusion, look at this, because they're trying to figure out a way to get the Jewish people to leave Europe and go to Palestine. They said that's an area we can send them. That's an area we can send them. And so there's about 1 million people living in the Palestine area around that time. So the inclusion of part of a Palestine in the Egyptian protectorate with Jerusalem as a free city could be a possible solution. This would make a Jewish infiltration into Palestine. A Jewish infiltration into Palestine less obvious and annoying to the susceptibilities of the Muslim and even certain elements of the Christian world. He writes that. He writes that amongst themselves. So in 1917, if you go next, you'll start seeing some maps. Pause here for a second. I want you to remember this map. I'm going to walk over there so I could show you something. This is the Sykes-Picot lines, okay, that the British and the French divided amongst themselves. But I want to show you an important point because I'm going to come back to it. What's the mic? Okay, right here. I don't even know the mic. I'm looking at this mic. It mics me up. Look at this very closely. You're looking at the big line, right? I'll come to that screen so you see. You're looking at A and B. There's another line I want you to focus on, which is right here. This line, look at how Palestine is divided. You're going to go to the next slide because then I focus on that. Do you see Palestine here? You see how there's a north and a south? Makes more sense to divide it that way, right? The line, look at how it's dotted. There's a north and there's a south, right? So the British were going to control the north and the French were going to control the south. But we're going to come back to that because it's an important point. Okay. So that's how they start dividing this up. You could go to the next slide. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration happens, right? Are we on that? Yes. Balfour Declaration. You could skip this. Where's that's Sykes-Picot? No, go back. I think we went too far. There it is, right? So here's the Balfour Declaration. This is actually what gave them their national statehood. That's what started it. The Balfour Declaration on November 2nd, 1917. This is it. This was the document. They went back home. They voted. They said, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to work on. That's how they got it. And if you read, interestingly, in the second paragraph, they said, and it should be noted, that there should be no harm to the non-Jewish communities. All right, let's figure that out, right? You can laugh about that now because it's sad. What else are you going to do? So between 1939 and 1945, the British mandate facilitated immigration from Europe to Palestine in the 20s, the 30s, and also in 1947, the population increased tenfold to 33% of Palestine. 33% of Palestine. And in 1946, the Zionists controlled less than 6% of the historic Palestine. Still, only about 5% of the land was controlled by the Zionist leadership. In 1947 was where the disaster happened. Now, do you have the map of Palestine? So I got to keep going. You could skip. Yep, keep. There's a series of maps I put. If you keep going forward. Yes. Okay. So you see how it started? Go to the next one. Go to the next one. You see what's happening? So immigration keeps coming in. Now go to the next one. Now, something interesting. I want you to focus on this. And I can't find too much information on this. You remember when we quoted in the khutbah earlier today about how Pharaoh weakened the people that he was subjugating to his rule by what? He said, وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. That Pharaoh, because this is a plan that's always happening by oppressors. They divide them. It's called divide and conquer. Allah mentioned it in the Quran. We just read through the Quran, but we weren't really benefiting. But now we can benefit from these verses. Well, Allah said, وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. Shia means that he divided them into groups. Does this make sense on how to divide this? Does it make sense? Why couldn't you just have a north and a south? Go to the next slide, please. And this is what eventually happens. He split them. He split them. So that eventually you can't have one talking point anymore. It's Gaza or West Bank. It's this or it's that. And then, when did Israel get the name as an occupier? Go to the next slide. In 1967. They decided that during their war that they were going to occupy completely the West Bank and Gaza. And so that's when they got that definition. So that means they're ruling over them. They're ruling over them, so they control the amount of water, the amount of electricity, the amount of goods that flow in and out. They control the movement between towns. If you've never been to Palestine, if you wanted to leave Newark and go to Elizabeth, you have to go through a checkpoint. It literally looks like a prison checkpoint. Guns, machine guns, get out the car, frisk, checked out, etc. Just to go from Newark to Elizabeth, and you're still in Essex County, if you will, quote unquote West Bank, if you wanted to think about it from there. So even within this region, they're limited on their travel and where they can go and who they can and can't see. And then they make you go around all of these different areas just to travel. So if you want to say that they have a right to defend themselves, let's ask the questions again. Do they give protection of life to everyone? No. No. There's innocent casualties since the day they took charge. Right? 750,000 were displaced day one. Day one. We got 1.1 million announced to have them displaced and moved from their own homes already in an occupied territory just last week. So this number just keeps adding. So they're not providing the protection of life. They're not providing the protection of property. They're not. Because you've seen the videos. You've seen the videos when these settlers come to these Muslims or these Christians living in these outskirts of towns. They come and grab it. They come with a machine gun. And that's it. Get out. That's how it works. Plenty of videos you can go and reference. Plenty. So they're not giving you protection of property either. Okay. What about protection of health? Protection of health. Well, who knows? Who knows? But that's many societies are crumbling in that regard. Allowing marijuana and all this other garbage. Nonetheless. Protection of religion. No. They're not letting you be freely worship what you want to worship. Last week in Masjid al-Aqsa, where it can allow a couple 100,000 musallin, a couple 100,000 Muslim praying there. 5,000 people prayed khutbah Jum'ah over there last week. 5,000. Today, I don't even know how many. We don't have the numbers yet. They didn't allow anybody under the age of either 55 or 65. So there are guns at the entrances of the masjid, and you're not coming in. So they're not allowing freedom of religion either. Not allowing you to pray and worship in your mosque. Can you imagine if you came to NIA, you were trying to get in the parking lot, and then you had the Newark Police Department with a M16, turn around. So what's going on in there? You're not 55 or older. You say, what? You're confused. You're utterly confused. You know why? Because this doesn't ring a bell for us. We can't even fathom that. But they're used to it. They won't turn around. They'll stay there and sit outside the gates of the Damascus gate, and they'll camp out in solidarity, in resisting, just for these basic rights, guys. We're not even talking about becoming a millionaire, opening up your own business. We haven't even gotten there yet. They just want to go and pray. They just don't want to visit family members. They just want to shop in the town center, and they're being told, go back. What about the protection of dignity and lineage? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, if we were to go back and say, do they have a legitimate right to defend themselves? I wouldn't use the word defend. I wouldn't use it at all. Because if by that same analogy, like we mentioned in the khutbah, you have to continue with that analogy, right? You have to say, like we mentioned, that the slave owners in America had a right to defend themselves against the slave uprising. You have to say it. Nobody wants to say it, though. Nobody wants to say it. And like we mentioned, what about in recent times in South Africa? Nobody wants to say that the South African oppressive apartheid regime had the right to defend themselves against people like Nelson Mandela and his calls for freedom. And I mentioned this too. Historically, we have in this country made mistakes backing the wrong group. Backing the wrong group. Just at that time as well, President Truman at the time, and I quoted you this from the United States Department of History. You could go to their website, the archives, and he did not back the resistance. And every administration after that allowed them to succeed. But we have a problem with that, you see. Just because they were wrong, it doesn't mean that they're right today. They could be wrong again. And that's why we have to send a message as loud as we can to them to let them know that we are against what they're doing. We're against a genocide. We're against this ethnic cleansing. We're against this let's level Gaza. Right in Manhattan now, they got these radicals throwing propaganda around. Now they got posters outside their windows saying, make Gaza a parking lot. That's insane. In Manhattan, right outside a window, make Gaza a parking lot. Remax, that real estate agency, just posted on their social media that they immediately fired this Zionist radical real estate agent that put up a funny picture where he posts Gaza's buildings bombarded and destroyed, all infrastructure. He puts a post up, he goes, newly listed property, vacant land, 160 square miles, oceanfront view, no electricity, and no utilities. And he puts LOL, ha ha ha. Disgusting. Do you know, if you were to write something like that, what would happen? We never hear from you again. Do you know what kind of disaster that would be? You know what kind of disaster that would be? You can't even imagine. But alhamdulillah, the beautiful thing about our religion is we don't have any of this to hide inside. Our religion is very clear. And we mentioned that. And it's in the Quran. It's embedded in our history, in our blood, in our belief that all of these things are absolutely wrong. So, what is this claim that they have, that they want to preserve what happened, their current state and their rules, so that what happened back 100 years ago, like what happened in the Holocaust, never happens again. Never happens again. And yet what happened to them, their ancestors, not them, because that didn't happen to them, but what happened sadly to their ancestors, they're only doing that to this current population in Palestine, which is very, very sad. And it's 2023 and this is still happening. So, let's look at the world from another perspective. What we have to look to do. The first thing we as Muslims, what action items can we take? The first thing I want all of you to know, and I mean this, is that you need to make an intention. You need to make an intention to go visit Masjid al-Aqsa as soon as it is safe for you to get there. You have to make the intention now. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I'm giving you the advice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there is hikmah in that advice. Maybe we just don't know it yet. Maybe we don't know it yet. But listen to this. When Sulaiman, the Prophet Solomon, the son of David, finished rebuilding Masjid al-Aqsa, Bayt al-Maqdis, he asked Allah for three things. You guys know this, right? The first thing he asked him is that his judgment was in harmony with what Allah's judgment is. And Allah gave him hikmah. And by the way, on a side note, Sulaiman, if you read Qisas al-Anbiya, was one of the first to set up a court system so that he didn't answer things on the fly. He looked at it completely. So we look back at the court system we have, dates back to the Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. Anyhow, he said a dominion, the second thing he asked Allah for is a dominion that no one after him would have. And that's why also Sulaiman alayhi salam ruled the world. And he also had control over the wind and jinn. And lastly, that no one should come to this mosque, to Masjid al-Aqsa, intending to pray there, except that he would emerge free from sin like the day his mother gave birth to him. And this is an authentic narration in Sunan Ibn Majah. And so the Prophet Muhammad said, Allah granted Sulaiman 2 of the 3, and I ask Allah to grant him the 3rd. In another narration, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he said, O Messenger of Allah, tell us about Bayt al-Maqdis. Tell us about Bayt al-Maqdis. He said it is a land of resurrection and gathering. Go and pray there. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself, our Prophet, told us, go and pray there. And at that time, it was not free from oppression and tyranny. It was under the non-believer rule, and they were not following Islam or giving everybody these 5 basic tenets like we talked about at that time in history. And yet the Prophet ﷺ still instructed the Sahaba, go and pray there. So it is wise for us to accept the advice from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And even though there is a tyrant, oppressive, apartheid regime running the show over there, we're still going to attempt and go and pray there. That's all we need to do, is go and pray in Masjid al-Aqsa. They said, Ya Rasulullah, and he said, go and pray there, for a prayer there is like 1,000 prayers anywhere else. In another narration, 500. So like 1,000 prayers anywhere else. They said, Abu Hurairah said, Ya Rasulullah, what if I can't travel and go there? This is important because a lot of us can't. He said, then send a gift of oil to light its lamps, for whoever does that is like the one who goes and prays there. It is a disaster. It is an atrocity of what's going on in Palestine for the last several decades, brothers and sisters. I want to make sure that's the statement that comes out of your mouth. Not what's happened in the last 2 weeks. That's just gotten worse. But it's been this way for the last 75 plus years. And that's what we have to resonate with the people in America to help them understand this. There was a woman where all her family died And they're trying to console her. They're trying to talk to her. And she's telling them, leave me alone. Leave me alone. If you're worried about me, don't worry about me. And if you're worried that I lost my children, I'm not worried about them because Allah is with Allah and their shuhada. What I'm worried about is all of you who are watching. What are you going to say in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment? And there's a lot we can do here in the United States. There's a lot we can do. The ability to speak against injustice. You have to be brave. And we mentioned that. And we mentioned it's okay to be afraid, right? And who did we quote? Who did we reference that was afraid? Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam, Allah Azza wa Jalla instructed him, he said, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. And then he said, قال رب اشرح لي صدري. He said, oh Allah, open my heart. Open my heart. ويسر لي أمري. And make my affairs easy. My way, pave my path to be easy. وحل عقدة من لساني. And if I'm afraid to speak, if there's a hindrance in my way of speaking justice to this tyrant, fix that. Don't let that be in my way of delivering the message like you want me to, oh Allah. And then he said, يفقه قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي هارون أخي. يفقه قولي. Now this is important, brothers and sisters. If you're going to speak about this matter, if you're going to speak about this topic, do it in an intellectual way. You have to learn before you sit there and try to get all of these followers to follow you. Before you answer this in front of your colleagues at work or at school or whatever things you're involved in. You have to understand how we got here, and you have to have this intellectual background on how to answer them. You have to know. You have to learn. And that's one of the things that Musa alayhi salam made dua to Allah Azza wa Jal about. So, one of the things that we want to say here is, should we be condemning any group? This word condemn is turned into the 2023 curse word of the year. First thing they learn, you condemn October 7th? And you pause. We condemn October 7th. Hamas. You got a new agenda right now. They need to get rid of Hamas. And at any costs. So you have to be smart about how you answer. And you say very basically, Islam is against any loss of innocent life, period. Period. However, also understand that there is no evidence that any babies were killed. There is no evidence that any women were raped. And even on their own channels, there is unbelievable amount of information where they are interviewed. The women are interviewed, and they're telling you quite the opposite about how much of a gentleman this resistance fighter was. And you all saw the interview where he says, oh, and he's waiting in the house, and he says, can I have a banana? Brother, you got the machine gun. She's there with 2 kids, and you're asking her, can I eat a banana? Something that doesn't add up. It's not adding up. And yet you still have media outlets, such as Fox News, still regurgitating 40 babies beheaded. They're still saying it. They're still saying it. Till today, by the way. Till this day, they're still saying it. But they didn't get the update from the Zionist media. It says, no, stop saying that. We're saying they were killed in cribs now. They have footage of some of these photographers and videographers creating false deaths and recording it and creating videos about it. People walking by, seeing them on the street, they're posting them. They're doing all of that so that they can win over the public opinion. So what we condemn is any, I don't even use that word, what we disagree and we are completely against is any loss of life, of innocent life. All of it, completely. Always will be, by the way, no matter what. Which side do you support? That's what they want to ask you. Which side do you support, though? You know, I want to know. So what you going to say to that? You support Hamas? Hamas, terrorist organization? Do you support them? This is how you answer. You say, we support the Palestinians' right to resistance towards the racist occupying Zionist state. That means we support 7.2 million people to resist, and we will not simply simplify this war to just a few. Amongst those Palestinians, just so you're all aware, even though the majority of them are Muslim, some of them are Christian. And as mind-blowing as this may seem, some of them are actually Jewish. Remember that first chart? There were Jewish people living there. It was all good. They never saw them as a threat. They never saw them as, I'm going to get you one day. Yeah, all 97% of that land's going to be mine. You just wait. They never thought about any of that. They were living side by side. Ask some of the older brothers and sisters who were living in Palestine pre-1917 and all this garbage. They would make sure that their Jewish neighbor or Christian neighbor had food on the dinner table. They would look after one another. So that's what we're for. So there were some Jewish people there as well. Who are we against? You have to know, who are we against then? I want to make sure you are educated enough for the following. And I want you to never forget this. If you're sleeping, wake up. Because this is the most important part. And if you're awake, wake up even further. We are not against Jewish people. Memorize that. Take that to the bank, deposit it, print it out. We are not against the Jewish religion. We are against Zionism. Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned that the Jewish and the Christian religion are Ahlul Kitab. And we have to even treat them even in a more special way in our religion. We're even allowed to marry from them. We're even allowed to eat from their slaughtered meat. If this was a Muslim instituted, if this was a Muslim governed country, they're allowed to have their own court system. They can govern amongst each other. Talk about freedom of religion. You see? So do not use that word interchangeably. You're making a grave mistake. Then you're going to be said that you're spewing anti-Semitism and all of that. We have no problem with Jewish folks at all. At all. Zero. What we have a problem is this apartheid Zionist regime. Completely. So, the next thing I'm going to say, and we're going to start wrapping up. I know there's another speaker. Where should we get our information from then? For now, as it stands, Al Jazeera English is on YouTube. Is on YouTube Live. They have a live channel. And as of right now, that is the best source that we can get information from. That is not completely one-sided and telling them about the exact snippets. You know, it's funny. When you go and look at the presidential race, you could see differing opinions. You click on CNN, you see one side. You click on Fox News, you see one side. You see MSNBC is trying to be somewhere in the middle. They just lost. They're getting no viewers, right? But you click on Zionist Israel and the right to defend themselves, brothers, sisters, click on any channel you want. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter which channel you're looking at. It's like they were given the script and they said, read this, and they read it, period. That's a problem. That means the freedom of speech in this country is being destroyed. We're watching that happen in 2023. But alhamdulillah, the American society and our neighbors are become more aware of that. That's why the majority of Americans under the age of 30 now side more with the Palestinian cause. That's never happened in history. That has never happened in the history of the United States. But you keep working. You keep doing your thing. Because it's helping, alhamdulillah. It's helping a lot. So never be silent about that. Are Palestinians living in an open-air prison? I love that, man. Now they got all sorts of people and posting about words, hurt, and all. And I've been telling people, what are you talking about? Open-air prison? Why don't you add ocean view while you're at it? Open air sounds awesome. I'm telling you, it sounds great. As if I was renting an apartment, it says airy. So you must have big windows. Sounds good. But there's nothing good about it. And they're not in prison. They're in a camp. They're in a concentration camp. That's what they're in. They've been thrown in there, and they're governed as the oppressive regime sees fit. That's it. There's been 200 trucks, over 200 trucks, we were talking about this on our way here, waiting on the border to enter Gaza. And they let in like 20. And most of it was like blankets. Because one of the conditions that we have to filter through any of the aid that's coming in. So the other ways that we can help, and we're going to summarize here, where the Prophet ﷺ said it is required that every Muslim gives charity, and so that we can also help with our wealth. The people asked the Prophet ﷺ, O Prophet of Allah, if someone has nothing to give, what will he do? He said he should work with his hands, yani get a second job. do Uber, do Lyft, do whatever you got to do to make a little bit of extra money. He said, help your family out because obviously you're in a bad situation, and then give from the extra money there. They said, Ya Rasulullah, what if he can't even do that? He said he should help the needy and those who appeal for help. They said, Ya Rasulullah, what if he can't even do that? He said then he should perform good deeds and keep away from evil deeds, and this will be regarded as his charitable deeds. So if you can't even do anything, brothers and sisters, do extra things. Do extra things that are founded within the religion of Islam. And I didn't want to say this in Khutbah Jum'ah because it wasn't a discussion time, but when I saw a flyer going around like Fast Thursday in solidarity for the Palestinians, that we don't have any communal fast in our Sharia, but we do have a communal dua. We do have a communal qiyam. We can do all of these things because the Prophet ﷺ taught us that. So if you are going to try to help these Muslims, do it in a way that the Prophet ﷺ told you to do it. You see? The shaitan can fool you. Say, oh, they're not eating, I'm not going to eat. What? And you feel good about yourself when you're breaking your fast? Now you're getting to eat. They still don't get to eat, so stop eating. That's the problem. You see how the shaitan tricks you? But if you make your dua and you add it on your own, you want to go fast Monday? Great. You want to fast Thursday? Great. You want to fast Saturday and Sunday because the Prophet ﷺ said that? Great. No problem. Go ahead and do it. But follow it in the way the Prophet ﷺ told you. So if you have a qiyam in your masjid and they're going to make dua for the people suffering, great, because that is ordained. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that. So if you're able to come to the masjid in that program, great. And last but not least, you got no money, you got no time to help these organizations, at minimum, you're still buying stuff. I know it. And know how I know it? Because Amazon's still flashing their Prime Day deals. They're still showing it. They wouldn't be advertising if you weren't buying. So don't buy things that are on the BDS list. And I'm sorry to bust your bubble. Starbucks ain't on there. I know you're mad. And I know the cup that they're pouring blood in there and all that. It's not on there. It's not on there. You have to be smart about how you respond to these matters. Now, if you just don't like it and you don't want to pay $20 for coffee, that's fine. But I'm just trying to tell you, be smart in how we do it. And by the way, it's not a secret. You can just go straight to the website, BDS movement, and you will see there's many things, by the way, that I even found out. This list keeps getting updated that I have to cut out from even things that I have in my own life. Okay, so we're going to summarize here. Help organizations like American Muslims for Palestine, CAIR, MLFA, the Muslim Legal Fund, IR USA, Islamic Relief, ICNA, Students for Justice in Palestine, and even non-Muslim ones, brothers and sisters, like JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace. I've been with them for a couple years now. Good group of people, they mean well. And they're the ones who were staging in the Capitol, by the way. They're the ones who got arrested with misdemeanor offenses that they're screaming not in our name. They did that. They did that. And you know what we're afraid, and you know what we're doing? We're afraid that we're going to get ostracized at work. We're afraid I'm not going to get promoted. I'm afraid I'm not going to get that government contract. These people just went and got arrested. You understand what just happened? They went and got arrested to say not in our name, to stand for this injustice. And what we're afraid of is the wealth. May Allah allow us to help this cause in any way possible, and ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He allows the people of Palestine to be liberated in our lifetime, and ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He guides these Zionists. I honestly mean that. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He guides them to Islam, because they see the beauty of this religion and they will be following Moses. They'll be following Sulaiman. They'll be following all of these prophets that they claim are only for them. They'll see the beauty in this religion and will live side by side in harmony. May Allah Azza wa Jal guide them to Islam, and may Allah Azza wa Jal allow anyone who has died ever since the beginning to be written with Him as martyrs in this religion, and that we will see them on the Day of Judgment, and that He allows us to use whatever means we have to help that cause, and that He does not hold this accountable against us on the Day of Judgment. Wassalamu alaikum wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
First of all, thank you very much, Brother Baker, for the amazing reminders and the history. Does anyone have any questions for him while he's here?
We answered all the questions. We good.
It was that good of a presentation. All right. Well, He's around, hopefully, for a little bit after the program. So if you have any questions, a few minutes, because he has to go. He's a great family man. Just make sure that you get a hold of him. If not, let the people in the community know if you have questions, or reach out to him on the side, and inshallah we'll be able to get back to you. So the second part of our program, I'd like to invite Sister Aya up. Oh, give me 1 second. I gotta give her bio. It's very impressive. So Sister Aya Zaki is from CAIR, an amazing organization that we've worked with a lot at the masjid. They come every Ramadan. They do a lot of programs with us. So Sister Aya is part of the growing legal team at CAIR New Jersey, where she focuses on civil rights casework and legal initiatives, including representing clients of affected communities through advocacy and litigation. She also engages elected officials and other key stakeholders to advance the organization's overall mission and address the concerns of New Jersey Muslim community. Prior to joining CAIR New Jersey, Aya served on the Deportation Defense Initiative team at the American Friend and Service Committee, where she represented clients in removal proceedings, most of whom were held in immigration detention facilities. She also represented non-citizens across the spectrum who were detained in both U.S. detention centers as well as Guantanamo Bay at the City University of New York Law's Immigrant and Non-Citizen Rights Clinic. Aya obtained her Juris Doctor degree from CUNY Law and her Bachelor of Arts from Columbia University. Sister Aya, please come up. You could clip this, all right? Microphone. All right.
Honestly, that's the clicker.
Yeah.
Do I control it?
Yeah, it should be fine.
Oh, thank you. It's okay, I'll leave it here. What is that?
It's a mic for the
Oh,
live
it's
stream.
in my case, and it was a clicker. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Becker, for that presentation. I think it dovetails beautifully with the Know Your Rights workshop that I'll be giving. So I'm a civil rights attorney, but a movement lawyer at heart, and I think they go hand in hand. That's for two reasons. One, we're all part of the movement to combat Islamophobia in this country, and that any global event that takes place against Muslims curtails our rights here. And so what's happening in Palestine right now is most definitely on the ground impacting our civil rights here. And that's not something we're not familiar with. The amounts of calls we've received in the last 2 weeks really does rival that of post 9/11 and the 2017 Muslim ban. We've been fielding calls for help nonstop in university campuses, in the employment context with companies, even with people traveling these days. An unprecedented amount of travelers have been stopped by TSA in the past 2 weeks. So I'm here to give you what your rights are in those contexts. So our team has been on the front lines working around the clock, fighting a biased media narrative. Everyone knows there's three branches of government: executive, we have the legislative, we have the judicial, and the fourth is media, like Brother Beckett emphasized. So we're challenging the media narrative out there. We're challenging our politicians and the positions they've been taking that without a doubt furthers the genocide that's happening right now. We're taking on cases of discrimination in the employment context. We're taking on meetings with superintendents who've been either overlooking the harms that their students have been facing in light of events, and or taking pro-Israeli stances, which again furthers the one-sided narrative that we've been hearing about. And again, educating the American public about our community's perspective and the need for them to recognize and acknowledge that the lives lost in Palestine are worthy of recognition and mourning as much as any other life. So on the topic of media being the fourth branch of government, I wanted to talk to you guys about the larger Islamophobia network. That's, you know, if you see the breakdown of it, honestly, billions of dollars going into media news outlets that furthers Islamophobic rhetoric. And when you go into who exactly funds these platforms, you'll find that most, if not all of them, are Zionist. So Islamophobia is definitely fueled and related to Zionism. So if you do want to take a stance against anti-Muslim conduct in this country, you must take a stance against Zionism. I'm sure all of you have had one experience or another in your workplace or at school or on social media being exposed to Zionist remarks about Palestinians. They usually have an anti-Muslim sentiment behind it as well. So, you know, in good news, if they're funding in the billions to keep this network alive, that just goes to show them, or to show our community how much they're threatened by our presence. If they're spending billions trying to counteract our presence in America or on the global scale, then that just means that we are a force to be reckoned with, and that should be empowering. So we have Gatestone, we have CSP, we have ACLJ. These are all Islamophobia networks that are also Zionist funded. So over at CAIR, we do take a multi-pronged approach to combating Islamophobia. We have the media department that holds press conferences and drafts press releases. So media engagement takes care of creating a counter narrative to the Islamophobic narratives that are on our mainstream media. We also have a government affairs department which engages with politicians on issues that concern our community or that impact our rights. And then obviously we have the legal department, which takes on legal cases. That takes many forms. It could be advocacy with police departments. It could be advocacy in the school setting. It could also be lawsuits as well. So let me get into, sorry, Kareem, I don't know what slide you're on. Okay. Let me just get straight into the workshop because I know you guys have been here for a little bit. So we've been seeing a rise in contact with law enforcement. Can anyone name agencies that are considered law enforcement in this country? Agencies that are considered under the umbrella of law enforcement. What does law enforcement mean? Yeah, the FBI. ICE, definitely. So ICE is under Homeland Security. So DHS is the mother agency, and ICE is the enforcement agency. We have the FBI, we have the police, our local police departments, we have TSA at the airports. Those are also law enforcement agencies that exist under Homeland Security. So anytime you have interaction with any of these parties, you have been in contact with law enforcement, and that's something that if it does happen to you, we would love to know and document it on our systems, and also advocate for you if need be. So law enforcement officers usually, there's two contexts that I want to highlight. There's a context in which law enforcement can come into contact with you at your house, and there's also on the street, and your rights look different in those two different contexts. If law enforcement comes at your door, and based on our experience post 9/11, we anticipate that there will be a rise in the number of Muslim households being contacted by the FBI, for example, similarly to what we've experienced before. I want you to know what you should do in that context. When the FBI is at your door, typically they're there to, sometimes people call it question you. It's actually an interrogation. It's not a benign interaction. If they're there for a specific purpose, right? Our general advice to community members who've been contacted by the FBI is don't open the door. If you feel the need to speak with the law enforcement officer, the only thing that you should be saying is, I don't wish to speak with you without my attorney present. You can slip CAIR's number underneath the door if the FBI so wishes to contact us if they want to pursue an interrogation of you. They should also present you with a search warrant if they're there to conduct a search of your house. I'm going to pass around what a valid search warrant looks like. This is what's considered a judicial search warrant, and that's distinct from an administrative one, which I'll touch on in a second. So a valid search warrant, if the FBI wants to search your house, has to have the scope of the premises, so the exact location and address of the area that they want to search. If that's missing, that's an invalid search warrant. It has to have the scope and time, meaning the search must be conducted at such and such hour. If the scope and time is missing, that's an invalid search warrant. And it has to have your name correct. If it's not, that's an invalid search warrant. And it has to have a judge's signature. If that's absent, that's an invalid search warrant. So if the FBI were to present the search warrant to you, you can request that it be slipped underneath the door. You can verify that it's a valid search warrant, and then if it is valid, then you're obligated under the law to open the door, okay? Now, if the FBI just wants to talk to you, which is typically what we see in our community, unless there's an investigation, then you do not speak with them, period, without your attorney. If you have an attorney, give your attorney a call. If you don't, you give us a call. It's 908-689-5900. And there are many reasons why we ask you not to do that. Some people say, if I have nothing to hide, then why not speak to the FBI? We've learned one too many times that nothing that you share with the FBI is in your best interest. You don't know what kind of information they're fishing for. Furthermore, you don't know what kind of language can be used against you. We had a case, for example, where a sheikh had exchanged one email with someone who ended up being a subject of an investigation and later indicted. The sheikh's one interaction with this community member was to give them marriage counseling, and the FBI, after sitting with him and interrogating him, had used the language he used with them to describe him as her advisor, and that has legal implications that someone not in the field won't know. And so that's an example of many other examples we see where even if it's a casual conversation, seemingly it has legal implications and can expose you to legal harm and criminal charges. So please do not speak to the FBI without your attorney present. Who here thinks that lying to law enforcement is a crime? Yes, it's a federal crime to lie to law enforcement. Now that's another thing that people don't realize when they're speaking to law enforcement. You don't necessarily know what would be considered a lie. If it's a misrepresentation of the truth, that could be construed as a lie. If it's inconsistencies in your answer from one phone call to another, that could be considered a lie. So that's all the more reason to not speak with the FBI or with law enforcement unless your attorney is present. Now, who here thinks that it's a lie for law enforcement to lie to you? Who here thinks that it is a crime for law enforcement to lie to you? It's not. No, they can lie. They can tell you they know exactly the answers that you'd be giving anyway, so you might as well sit with them. That could be a complete lie to poach you into sitting with them. So, I know, all the more reason, not to speak unless you have protection there. So when you're stopped on the street by law enforcement, you have to identify yourself when you're asked to. We typically ask community members to always have identification on hand that only has their name and their photo, so the most minimal identification markers at hand, and that's for two reasons. One, if you don't hold citizenship here, presenting your passport might give reason for that law enforcement agent to call on ICE. And we advise people do not present your non-U.S. citizen passport, non-American passport if you are to present identification. And two, you don't want to give the law enforcement your address because you're not obligated to. So carry something with you that's maybe like your student ID or anything that's equivalent to that, where it's a photo and your full name. If you're mistreated by the police, in the past 2 weeks, because of the protests that are happening, this has become a problem. If you're approached by cops while you're protesting, we ask that you please conduct yourself respectfully, even if they're aggravating you, and they do, and they provoke in order to incite you to respond back. We've seen kids as young as 18 being charged with disorderly conduct, and that goes on your criminal record. Try to the best of your abilities, to conduct yourself in a respectful manner, answer the cops' questions, and if anything does happen, document the cop's name, take the cop's badge number down, the precinct or the agency they're affiliated with. We always say the best clients are the ones that are like a journalist, like take every detail down, bring it to us, then we'll deal with how to raise complaints against that officer, but do not take matters into your own hands and react aggressively to a police officer. It never ends well. Now, when you're on, traveling, what are your rights as a traveler? These days, again, we've been seeing a lot of community members being stopped or taken for secondary screening as they're going through customs. You have some rights as you're going through, as you're entering, not as much as you do when you fully enter, and not as much as when you're a U.S. citizen. So two things: your constitutional rights aren't completely fleshed out in that span between you going through customs and entering the country. So you don't actually have a constitutional right to an attorney, or at least DHS doesn't think so. So there are things that you can do. One, if you're taken to the back room for secondary screening, again, take the officer's name down, the agency they're affiliated with, because it could be TSA or it could be CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, and take down the badge number. If you're a U.S. citizen, you're only obligated to answer questions related to the scope of your travel. So if the officer asks you how long you've been in the country that you visited, where did you stay, things that are related just to your travel, you're obligated to answer. Ultimately, as a U.S. citizen, you're entitled to entry, so there's no fear that you're going to be detained there indefinitely or for longer than a couple of hours. You're entitled to entry. So answer the questions that are related to your travel. Anything beyond that, I will not be answering this question without my attorney. Now, like I said, there's no constitutional right to an attorney, but a lot of things ends up being at the discretion of the officer interrogating. So many of the officers are not the sharpest tool in the box, and they'll relent to calling your attorney, thankfully. They don't know the rights. So we ask that community members take down our number, and when they're detained, depending on the airport they're detained at, we'll have a CAIR attorney call from the closest chapter to try to get in. But if you're prone to being taken into secondary screening, we really, really advise you to let us know at least a week before your travel, so that we're anticipating a phone call and so that we can file a representation form with DHS. So those are two really important things. Now, if you're constantly subjected to secondary screening, and it's not just a product of the global events at hand today, then we ask you to file a complaint with us so that we can advocate for you with through administrative means within the Homeland Security process. If you're stopped every single time you travel, there's a high likelihood that you're on a watch list, and we can help with that. We can either add you to existing litigation or help advocate for your removal from that list. But you need to let us know. And if you're on the no-fly list, for example, meaning you can't print out your boarding pass and you're prohibited from boarding a plane whenever you try to, then please contact us as well. There are ways in which we can advocate for your removal from the no-fly list. Now, your rights as an employee. You have a legally mandated right to a workplace that's free of harassment and discrimination. If you look at our website, we have a template up that you can use to apply to your own case in order to advocate for yourself within your company. If you find that there's unfairness in treatment at work, if you're denied religious accommodations like the ability to step out for prayer or a quiet space for prayer, those are all things that those templates on our website can help you with. And if you find it difficult to kind of customize to your specific case, call us and we'll help you draft it. And we can send it on your behalf if you fear retaliation. But you have a legal right to a non-hostile work environment, and that's really important. You should be able to complain to your employer without fear of retaliation. Now, the protection against retaliation is only applicable within specific contexts. That's retaliation if you're complaining about discrimination, religious discrimination, nationality-based discrimination, racially based discrimination. You do not have protection against retaliation when it comes to expression of political opinion, and that's what we're seeing a lot right now. So be very careful with what you're posting on social media or the types of conversations you're having in the workplace, because unfortunately, New Jersey laws do not protect against being fired when it's on the basis of political opinion. There's a way in which we can present the facts once you make a complaint about retaliation you're feeling, so that it falls under a protected class. But you need to call us to help you with that, because otherwise you're not entitled to any protections or safeguards when it comes to political speech in the workplace. Yes?
I feel like a lot of people in Jersey also work in New York. Do those same laws still apply?
Yes. They're largely the same. Yeah. Again, when you're faced with job discrimination, it's the same kind of hygiene that we ask of you when you're interacting with law enforcement. Be as calm and polite as possible. Document when you can. We're in something called a one-party consent state, which means you have the ability to, record without the consent of the other party involved. So you can press record. Document everything: the person, date, time, place, and that can all be used later on by us as a means to advocate for you properly. Do not sign any documents with your employer that you did not read or cannot read. You bring it to us, we can review it for you and assess whether or not you should be signing that document. And again, if you're denied any religious accommodations, we can also advocate for you there. Now, sadly, this is also a context in which knowing your rights is really critical right now, and that's knowing your rights in the context of being at a school as a student. We're seeing a lot of students being treated horrifically by administration and by faculty. Last week we had a student who was called a terrorist by their teacher, and that teacher faced no repercussions. So we're in the process of getting the administration to recognize that teacher needs to be reviewed. Her conduct needs to be reviewed, and there needs to be some legal concern involved in the way that she conducted herself. So, unfortunately, we have to teach our children what their rights are in these spaces, or they'll kind of hold it in until it's too late to advocate. Yeah?
I have a question about the last line.
Sure.
How often are these court cases won, in favor of the person who is discriminated?
It depends on what subject matter you're talking about. Are you talking about employment lawsuits? Are you talking about lawsuits against the FBI?
Employment, aren't most like employers like private institutions? So like, isn't it pretty difficult to win those type of court cases?
No, it is definitely a case-by-case basis. If there's clear religious disability, nationality-based discrimination, those complaints generally go far. The problem happens when it's more insidious, like you know in your gut that you're being treated unfairly because of your background and your identity, but you can't pin the employer down to a specific language or conduct. Those are much more difficult to win. So I would say a lot of the cases fall in the latter bucket. So yeah, it's very difficult to get some victory there. But when the client is really good at documenting everything, when they know that they're in a workplace that's prone to hostility, that takes the case much further. So your rights as a student. Some challenges Muslim students face today. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we've seen that in the past 2 weeks that if a colleague who has your worst interest at heart wants to get you fired, they screenshot the things that you've liked as well. We've seen that as a things that you do on social media. Absolutely, yeah.
So if I was to like something, and my employer scrub my profile and they see something, can they hold? I mean, I'm sure they can hold it against me, but is it considered like political opinion?
Yeah, it's considered political expression. It's considered you endorsing whatever message that you liked, is what we've been seeing. Even a like is considered a communication of political opinion. Yeah, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that there's no wiggle room to advocate for your right as an employee. There is, but you have to engage with a legal organization. Yeah.
I'm assuming you've heard of the canary mission.
Yeah.
So if one of us were to hypothetically speaking, like be added to the canary mission, are we able to sue for like defamation of character?
No, you're not. Unfortunately, many legal organizations have tried to shut down Canary Mission. Their IP address, from my understanding, operates from Tel Aviv, so it's really hard to get them into courts here. That's my understanding, but I know that there's been numerous efforts to get that closed down, and none have been successful. Yeah. So some challenges Muslim students may face in school today include lack of accommodations for our religious holidays or for prayer space or dietary needs. Identity-based bullying is on the rise as well. That's a challenge that Muslim students, and you should speak to your kids about this as well. Culturally insensitive faculty, administration, curriculum. Please keep a close eye on what your child's curriculum is because it oftentimes goes unseen by the parents, and these are ideologies that the rest of the students are being indoctrinated with, and the Muslim community needs to be on the lookout for that if we want to change the education system here. Non-inclusive learning environments, social isolation. Now, what are your rights as a Muslim student? You have the right to a safe, inclusive learning environment by law. You have a right to a school environment that's free from discrimination. You have the legal right to educators, staff, and administrators who are trained and knowledgeable and responsive to your faith-based needs. You have the legal right to reasonable religious accommodations, including excused absences for religious holidays, alternative arrangements during lunch break with fasting, clean and quiet prayer spaces, opportunities to make up missed exams and classroom instruction if you've missed it due to a religious reason. Those are all reasons that you can contact us to make sure that your child is receiving those accommodations. Now, the last thing I want to say that I feel like I glossed over, if you're stopped by ICE and you're a non-citizen and they present you with a search warrant, similar to the one that I sent around. That's called an administrative search warrant, and that doesn't need anything beyond the signature of the ICE officer. So if the signature is there, you have to comply. If it's not there, it's invalid. But unfortunately, the standard for the validity of an administrative search warrant is far, far less than that of a judicial one. So just keep a lookout. Happy to take any questions if anyone has any. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Nice.
By next year, I am planning on going back to school for a master's, and my classes are, kind of late in the evening, of course, as I work. But I think of like the latter prayers, like Isha, like how could I implement that, like when I'm, in class or whatnot? Like, is there like a way I could, present my religion in I guess a typical way, of course, so just as a professional person at this time, prior or whatnot?
Your academic year starts, have a conversation with your individual faculty member whose class falls within that prayer time. Usually they're really responsive and they allow you time to step out and come back in during instruction. But if you're finding a kind of hostile response or like a non-responsive faculty member, then contact us, and we've been able to get through to administration to accommodate the need for prayer time. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know that there have been some arrests due to the protests. How much is that actually, does that go on your criminal record?
Yes.
It does?
If during your arrest you're issued a summons or a ticket for appearance, that goes on your criminal record. The last few cases we've gotten are protesters acting aggressively with police officers, either in even facial expression, aggressive behavior in hand gestures. They've been charged with disorderly conduct. That's a misdemeanor. That goes on your criminal record, even if it ends up getting dismissed. Yeah.
So there's a big march in DC tomorrow. What do you advise for the ones who are going, like how to conduct themselves? Because we don't want any further, any necessary actions that may happen if certain people are like disorderly or whatever. So
Yeah.
what would you advise us?
My best advice based on the past protests is to not react when you're provoked by the opposite side. If there's a counter rally, being charged with battery it's a very low standard. It's the intention to commit assault. So anything could be construed as the intention to commit something. So if you're belligerent to the counter protester and a cop, in his or her discretion wants to, interfere, that's plausible. So my best advice is do not conduct yourself reactionarily. You're there to amplify the Palestinian call for a ceasefire. You're not there to react to the Israelis. They're there to react with us against us for whatever reason. But you're there for a specific purpose. Just focus on that purpose. Don't react to counter-protesters. Don't react to being provoked. If you see a police officer mistreating someone, this is something that came up in one of our intakes last week. Document him. Don't try to interfere. You're gonna get arrested with the person. So document it. That's the most helpful way to advocate for the person being brutalized, and then have a legal representative take care of the rest.
So if you have signs during the protest, like if there's signages and stuff like that, and it may not be the nicest of signs, is that considered like political, sides, or is that considered like maybe somewhat belligerent? Is that be criminal?
In the context of a protest, if you have a sign that has like but that is I mean, you being at a protest is a political expression in itself. So if you're that's why we see protesters hiding their faces. It's not because we're prone to hiding our faces so that we can resemble like a terrorist organization. It's because if you're documented by someone and that photo sent to your employer, that could, jeopardize your livelihood. But yeah, we're good. Okay, thank you so much. No problem. Oh, sorry.
All right. Thank you very much, Sister Aya, for the amazing reminders. She's here, so if anyone, I know there's a lot of questions, please ask her before she goes. If not, the CAIR's information is on the screen, right? So they're an amazing organization. They do a lot of great work. They're a great advocate for everyone in the community. So if you do have any questions, please make sure they do reach out to them. It's in your own best interest. And again, it's a very sensitive time now. So if you do go out in protest, or you're speaking about it at work or with your friends or anyone at school, like she said, please remain calm, conduct yourself in an orderly manner, right? Do not get heated in case things do get heated. Finally, okay, 2 minutes and then we have dinner downstairs. The last thing that we want to do, so Brother Baker gave us a great overview of what's happening. Sister Aya gave us a great understanding of the rights that we have when we do decide to speak out. The last thing that we want to do is invite Sister Hannah Khalil from Islamic Relief. How do we help, right? Like, how do we help? We see what's happening in Palestine. What is it that we can do to help? So, Sister Hannah, she's the Northeast Regional Manager for Islamic Relief. So, please listen attentively. I know we all want to do the best that we can to help these people that are in dire need.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I know you've been here and you're waiting for dinner, so I'm going to make this real quick. I won't even pull up a slide. As Brother introduced, I'm the new regional manager for the Northeast for Islamic Relief USA, and I'm going to skip to the emergency. Maybe another day, inshallah, I can join your community to talk a little bit more about what Islamic Relief does. I see, mashallah, you guys are working with us next week to have the Day of Dignity, which is a local program, mashallah, so I'll see you guys then, for those of you who will be in attendance. So as you all know, I don't need to go into what's been happening in Gaza and Palestine this past couple of weeks. Islamic Relief, alhamdulillah, has been able to utilize in this moment items that have been procured prior to the current escalation in warehouses to start distributing emergency supplies. So whether that's medical, pharmaceuticals, food, hygiene kits, and that sort of stuff. However, all of those supplies are quickly dwindling. So what we have been doing in the meantime is putting together supplies outside of the Gaza Strip, including in the West Bank, Jordan, and in Egypt. And so that's why I'm here, just to kind of like appeal for your support. If you have any questions, if you would like to make a donation, I'll be at the table outside in the lobby. And I can share my contact information with you all. And I know there's been a lot of questions about the blockade, how are we getting aid in, what are we doing? Again, we were able to, alhamdulillah, utilize our supplies that are already within the Gaza Strip, as I mentioned, are quickly going away, and work with our partners who are on the ground right now to distribute those items. And stockpiling so that as soon as a safe humanitarian corridor is open, we are able to transport our items inside. And so we don't want to wait until the last minute and things open and then it's like, okay, now we need to start getting ready, right? We need to ready ourselves from now so that we can be ready, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much.